Hey, Josh here from Patriot Liner. We are here in Quincy, Illinois at Full Throttle Parts, and we're putting together the RokBugy build. So Nick from Rockstar Garage called and said, hey, we've got this old bug. I think we're gonna make it into a rock crawler. Kind of one of those things you don't really take serious until you see the rendering and his ideas come to life. We shipped the bug from California over to Quincy, Illinois to Full Throttle Parts. Not only are they one of the Midwest's best sprayers, but they build a killer custom roll cage. I'm here with Brandon from Pentagram Engineering inside Full Throttle Parts. He is heading up the custom cage build on the RokBugy. Can you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing?
Absolutely. Ryan come in and talked to me about it. We had the opportunity to do one of these builds with this buggy, which is probably one of the hardest ones we've done. There's no square corners anywhere. Now we're on the sides of it where we get to design it. We're actually cutting the tubing, making sure my measurements are correct, and then hopefully we can weld it together by the end of the week.
So obviously I'm not super familiar on how to build a cage, right? But I come in, I look at your design process, the software that you're using, the measurements that you're taking, makes my head spin. How does this thing really go from start to finish?
Nick told us exactly what he wanted to do with it, and that's my interpretation to get the cage into the design specs that he wants, also making it functional, and then we have to realize that it's possibly going to be on the trails, so we have to make it safe. We come in, put the system into work, we use Bentech. We'll basically lay it out on a computer and then go back in, re-verify the numbers to make sure that we didn't make a mistake. Put the tubing in, hit the button, and off we go.
How many times do you measure before you cut?
3 to 4 times at the most, sometimes 6.
That's good. When we got here, we commandeered the spray booth, we moved the bug into the booth, and then we started prepping. So I've never sprayed a bug, obviously. I've done Jeeps, I've done vans, Humvees, used to these big, heavy vehicles. And then in rolls the RokBugy, this tiny little, VW Beetle. The sheet metal on these things are like a beer can. They're pretty thin. And this one was actually sandblasted, so it really made that metal ultra flexible almost.
Basically working on hot rods and stuff like that, you'll learn how to fatigue metal, pull metal, a torch on one side, a wet rag on the other, a slight mallet to move the steel, and it'll stay in position.
It's definitely something new and different. The beauty of it is the roof was removable. The doors and hood came off really easy. So we really just took this thing apart, which gave us full access to the interior to make sure we sprayed every square inch of this thing. We sanded everything down with 80 grit and our nylon cup brushes to get it nice and clean. We hit it with an acetone bath just to give it a little bit of a clean surface before we added the primer. And this time we used a specialty primer generally used for industrial projects on bare steel or concrete. So we purchased the primer from MCC, one of our Patriot Liner distributors out of Indy, and we actually had one of their reps come over and really make sure we were mixing this thing correctly. We've never used it before on a vehicle exterior, so we wanted to make sure we nailed it. And Dan showed up, showed us exactly how to use it, how to mix it, and it went on great. So we showed up and I brought my gear, my respirator. I had full intentions of pulling the trigger on this thing. I usually do most of the big marketing builds myself in the spray booth, but in walks Mike, and he's the sprayer here at Full Throttle. So have you done a bug? Have you done a full exterior?
No, I have not.
Okay, so this was your first go at it, right?
Yes, sir.
How long have you been spraying bed liners?
About 1.5 years.
Okay, so you guys are a recent switch to Patriot Liner, right?
Yes.
So we put the Patriot Liner online, made sure everything was good with your system. Anything out of the ordinary for you, or just another day at the shop?
Well, just another day, just same old, just different surface and something new to me.
he wanted to do it. And I love that, absolutely loved it. So I backed Mike up as good as I could and let him do his thing in the booth, and man, he killed it. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on spraying your first full exterior. Was it much different than a truck bed? Because I know the truck beds, you kind of go in stages, right? Of certain panels first. Or did you have a game plan kind of thought up? Or?
Well, doing the roof, I was more nervous about. When you start at one end, you got to keep that same height all the way across. If you don't, then you're going to get it thick in that top part. Then when you come back down.
A little bit of a high-low zone, yeah.
So that was the hardest part. Other than that, the rest of it is just natural.
Just another day in the booth.
Yes.
Awesome. Yep, so we had everything kind of separated, right? We had the hood, the doors, the roof. We wanted to make sure we could fully encapsulate some of these pieces. While we sprayed the doors, we sprayed the hinges a little bit thick. And I'm a big fan of getting the base coat over everything and then texturing it all as one, as you would see it on the street. So we had to put the doors back on to texture. Obviously, we put it a little too thick on the hinges, so we had to do some trimming. So I'm on the East Coast, and Nick usually calls me with these off-the-wall ideas at 10, 11 o'clock at night. I'm getting into bed. So how did you hear about the bug? Because that's how I heard about it.
Honestly, I probably heard about it way after you did, because I kind of knew about it with Jarrett really working on it. Really had no idea kind of what the vision was for it, right? You know, really until this week, kind of seeing some of the renderings and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, you know it's going to have big old Mickey Thompson tires on it.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, kind of seeing it in pictures, I didn't really get it, but once we saw it, got it here, kind of drew the cage up, just the whole transformation of putting the bed liner on, it's like, okay, now this is going to be something that people won't forget about.
So you've sprayed a couple products in the past. What'd you think of the Patriot liner?
I like how it laid. It's smooth, and altogether, I'm impressed with it.
Yeah, the texture was super uniform. I think you sprayed your truck this morning too, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. Can't wait to see it. Second you walk in the booth, what's your thoughts?
I mean, it just screams badass, realistically. I mean, just the texture, the top coat just it almost has a metallic when you see it in the right light, because just the texture, it changes and reflects. It almost looks like a little bit of a metallic in it, the way it hits the light. So it's awesome. The
material laid down great, no issues whatsoever. It stuck to the primer really well. And then, you know, Mike stepped out of the booth and I jumped in to put our UV top coat on top of it. So on exteriors, we always use a UV top coat, whether that's a single stage urethane, automotive grade paint, or whether it's our Patriot Liner UV Plus polyaspartic. We always want to make sure that it's going to keep its shine and luster for years to come. So this time we mixed up some UV top coat in black on top of the black bed liner to give it a really rich, deep look. Sprayed that on in about 3 coats, letting it dry 20, 30 minutes in between coats so it didn't fill in that texture, and this thing turned out awesome. By the time we came in this morning, they had already wheeled this thing over into the cage build area where they're starting to cut, bend pipes, and get this thing thrown together. How does it compare to when you started building cages to now?
Well, back in the old days when we used to build race cars, we used plumb bobs, tape and markers and pencils on the floor. We took a tape measure, we took a piece of paper and pencil, drew it up, and a lot of times we'd use cardboard templates. With the aid of the computer, say like roughly we would go 7 days to do one by hand with taking measurements and coping and everything else. We went from 7 days to 6.5 hours of complete build, and then probably anywhere from 6 to 15 hours of welding, depending on how elaborate the system is after we get it done.
So as a builder, you've been in this industry a long time. I'm sure you've seen your share of coatings. What did you think about the Patriot when we pulled this thing out of the booth?
I liked how it laid down. It's not aggressive. Some of the materials that I've been worked around and putting cages in, It's really abrasive, sticks to everything. You get in there and you break, you scrape your knuckles on it when we're trying to build the cage systems in it. I liked how this one laid down a little better. It's got not as an aggressive, but a smoother texture. It has a better flow than the rest of them that I've seen. And as far as the color tone, I don't notice any shade differences in the color tone.
Yeah, it came out really uniform.
So, yeah, I mean.
Maybe that's Mike.
It might be. I'm not going to say much. But
So if you want some behind the scenes footage or see more of this build, head over to Crawl TV on YouTube. And if you want some more information on America's Bedliner, head over to www.patriotliner.com. And what would you say the best beer in America is?
Coors Light.
Oh. Cut.